We did it. Yes, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very, very much for participating. If you don't mind, I want to spend 1 minute just introducing you, letting everybody know what you're about. And obviously, I'll let you, I'm sure you could.
With the creek
What
of
is
us.
that?
Who the hell is it? Start and with a creek of us.
Ex- exactly. So even though everybody's Stephan Kesting looks completely unassuming with this beautiful mustache, you would be surprised to know that he's actually a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and has been doing martial arts for over 40 years. He's been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for over 25 years. Stephan has published countless articles in print magazines and has been interviewed by many blogs, radio shows, podcasts, and news organizations. Stephan operates grappleart.com, and through his website, he offers articles, newsletters, apps, and videos on how to become a better grappler and a better human being. Stephan also has a master's degree in biology and has been a first responder for 21 years. So to give people an introduction on why and how we have made contact, so I've been following Stephan's work for a while, and not only do I enjoy the content that he puts up, but the way he communicates and delivers it. He is, and you'll meet him now, he's super funny, he's incredibly charming, he articulates himself beautifully and really well, and you'll see he doesn't mince his words. He says what he means, and you can really be sure that when you leave a conversation with Stephan, you will know exactly where he stands and exactly where you stand as well. So over the last year and a half, Stephan, I've noticed that you've been incredibly vocal about your position on COVID and the vaccines, the anti-vaxxers, the pro-vaxxers, etc. I really thought and think your commentary is very strong and to the point and could seriously add some value to our discussion about COVID and the vaccines and this pandemic that we're going through. So I reached out to Stephan and asked if he would have a conversation with me, which he completely agreed without any preconditions, which I'm incredibly grateful for. So here we are, Stephan Kesting. Did I do your introduction any justice?
Well, I'm blushing, but I appreciate the very kind words.
So maybe to start, to give everybody an introduction of why I'm doing this. As a psychologist, I'm really interested in understanding people's positions, why they hold on to their positions, whether they're right or wrong, why they hold on to the position that they have, and how these positions affect others. Since the beginning of the pandemic, all sides of the spectrum, from the pro to the other side, the anti-vaxxers, have been holding on strongly to their respective beliefs and holding on to it with misinformation, sometimes fake news, so to speak. There is no clarity in terms of the noise because all sides are speaking perhaps over one another. Through these conversations that I have on these platforms, I hope to help people out there recognize that respect and kindness in conversation is a key ingredient to, at the very least, begin the conversation in the first place. So now, Stephan, and today I want to talk to you about a couple of things, and I know our time is limited, but I will try to cover as much as I can in the time. So I want to cover your position on COVID, what you think we can do differently as a society. How do we get to the bottom of this noise and clear the noise? Where do we get real information from? What can governments do differently? What can we as individuals do differently? How do wealthy countries have a responsibility over poor countries? So I want to cover all this ground. What do you think about vaccine passports as well? But we'll cover as much as we can in the limited time. But maybe let me start firstly. What is your position in terms of COVID and vaccines and this pandemic?
Well, and that's a giant question. I mean, I think right now we're in an era where contrarianism, to give it a kind word, or widespread conspiracism, it's just absolutely rampant, right? I mean, a huge percentage of the population believes that in some variation, it's either in the full QAnon gamut or QAnon light, that there's a massive conspiracy involving Dr. Fauci and CDC and the World Health Organization and Health Canada and all the universities and every researcher from Pfizer and Moderna and Bill Gates and the Public Health Department of Albania and the British Medical Journal and the Lancet, and that this is all a giant scamdemic, pandemic. And then that's evolved over time, right? Like the same people who were yelling about this being a scandemic pandemic then pivoted seamlessly into anti-masking. And then I pivoted seamlessly into anti-vaccine, and then pivoted seamlessly into pro-ivermectin, and basically just always taking a contrarian position. I could understand having concerns about the vaccine, say. I don't know, if you're a member of some religious group, I think it's the Seventh-day Adventists or something, that don't want, injections. Okay, cool. I understand that. But then why are you also anti-mask, right? I would actually respect anti-vaxxers who are running around wearing N95s. Like, for my personal beliefs, I don't believe in a vaccine. I'm scared of this, I'm scared of that, I'm worried about this. But to protect other people and to make other people feel comfortable, I'm going to wear a mask, like a really good quality mask. I would respect that to some extent. But just instinctively running to the contrarian position seems very, very strange to me. I think it's indicative of, it's a whole bunch of things. I think and people have said that it's very comforting to believe in conspiracy theories because it gives the sense that somebody's in charge, right? There's a bunch of people smoking cigarettes in the Star Chamber somewhere. There's, leftist billionaires. And let's be honest, when people say leftist billionaires, it's code word for the Jews, right? The Jews are out there running it. It's terrifying that there's someone out there planning everything, but it's also reassuring because the alternative is it's freaking chaos, and that the world doesn't actually make much sense, and there isn't some grand master plan at work. So I think the conspiracism is really underlies a lot of our problems, because it gives the worst possible interpretation to any early confusion. Like, the CDC lied to you, they said masks didn't work. Yeah, they said that for about a month, and then they changed their position as new data became available. It's cherry picking little pieces of data, and I think that is extremely worrying. I'm not sure I'm answering your question. That's just my rant about conspiracism.
Great.
Which is such an attractive ideology, and I don't know enough about the history of conspiracism to know when there have been equivalent times in history. I'm sure that I don't know. I'll steal one from the anti-vaccine freedom advocates, right? Like, they always run to Nazi Germany. We're living in Nazi Germany. Having to get vaccinated to take a flight is the same as wearing a yellow star and going to a concentration camp. Well, no, it's not. But there is an analogy, and that's the rampant conspiracism about the Jews and the communists having destroyed Germany's chances in World War I, then led to Hitler's election in the 1930s. So, you could be argued that Hitler's rise to power was on the back of wild conspiracism about the international cabal of Jews running everything. So,
Stephan, I want to ask you, why do you think their voice is so loud? Why do you think their voice is so rampant? Why do you think, if science is so solid in its understanding of this vaccines and the COVID virus, why is the alternative so powerful?
Yeah. I'll say that initially, science wasn't really very clear about the COVID virus, right? Like, we watched science in real time. we're still learning new things about tuberculosis, and tuberculosis has been with us for thousands of years, right? We've watched the world scientific community, and that by that I'm including everything from university researchers to public health officials to international organizations to pharmaceutical companies, trying to figure this out in real time and coming up with conflicting pieces of data, looking at preprints that were published preliminarily, hadn't gone to peer review, and I was on those papers. I was looking at them, but I think I have enough of a background in science to know that a significant percentage of stuff that gets published is incorrect. A much larger percentage of preprint stuff is incorrect, published on medRxiv, for example, and that you really have to take a look at the aggregate of the data, and that something's not proven until it's been proven multiple different ways from multiple different sources and replicated. So I'll say that initially the science wasn't very strong. I think the messaging around the science has been particularly weak. It's was it Brandolini's law that the amount of energy it takes to refute bullshit is 10 times more than what it does to create that bullshit in the first place. I think that's absolutely true. I mean, the number of conversations that I have with people where they go, what about this and this and this and this and this and this? They just cut and pasted it. Well, I'm not a virologist. I'm not an epidemiologist. I do have a background in science. I can refute, call it 9 out of 10 of your points, but each refutation is going to take half an hour. And by the time I've finished my 4-hour essay refuting the 10 points you've made, you've gone and cut and pasted another 10 points, like of bullshit, in the technical setting. So there's a real asymmetry between trying to argue these things in good faith and the ability to produce disinformation. I had the privilege once, it was awful, but I had the privilege of watching Duane Gish. Duane Gish was a scientific creationist who would go around and argue with professors of evolution at universities. And basically the agenda of scientific creationism was to make such a fuss about teaching evolution in high schools that it would just basically be abandoned from the educational curriculum. And they were proposing that you can look at the Bible and you can see, you get science out of the Bible. And that's a whole nother rant for a whole nother podcast. And I'm fired up now. So however long you want to go about this, until my phone runs out of charge, I'm yours.
Done. Done.
So I watched Duane Gish essentially dismantle a really, really intelligent professor of evolution, Graham Bell at McGill, because Graham Bell was arguing in good faith, and Duane Gish was using rhetorical techniques of just firing off 35 factoids, each one of which Dr. Bell could refute, but he would spend his entire time refuting point one, and all the audience would remember is that he didn't get around to points 1, 2, 3, or 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, blah, 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 to 35. So that's the Gish Gallop, or the Gish Gallop. And so it's asymmetrical warfare, really. I think that it's so difficult to refute this. There are many other reasons. Tribalism and ideology. I will say that I'll get political. Donald Trump basically minimizing COVID for an entire year, basically eschewing mask wearing, basically not making a big giant fuss about vaccination, basically getting vaccinated in secrecy, did a lot to draw the tribal lines here of like, are you fuck, sorry, I'm swearing, I'm worked up.
Bring it.
The science really doesn't have anything to do with Democrat, Republican, with left versus right, but it has been politicized, and in this particular case, sort of the supporters of Trump and Trumpism really have it wrong. Like, I don't think this is two sides to this. I mean, I'm sure they would say the same about me, but hell, I'm on the podcast here, and when you interview Alex Jones, then you can have a separate conversation.
So, Stephan, I want to ask you. So, you've taken a position, and I've watched your social media interactions, and you spend a lot of time refuting these bullshitters. Why do you spend so much time if you just kind of let it go, let them rant, maybe block them? What is your personal mission in terms of this pandemic, or why did you take up this position at all?
Well, why did I take it up? I never wanted to be at the center of this controversy. I would be happy to talk about jiu-jitsu and then occasionally delve off into physical fitness or canoeing or Arctic expeditions or interesting stuff I'm reading about, and mainly stick to that. However, I'm at a confluence of three different worlds. I'm at a confluence of martial arts, right, and jiu-jitsu. I do have a very strong background in science, and I did 2 degrees in biology. I did research or was involved in research for 15 years. And now I'm a first responder and have been for 22 years, focusing on hazmat, but I still go to medical calls. I still see this stuff up close and personal. And so this is kind of the perfect storm. And I think that given that I had a social media platform, and especially given that so many of the influencers in the sport took the extreme opposite position, I felt that somebody had to speak up. I didn't want that to be me, but it would have been unethical to stay silent. So, yeah, for sure, it's not good for me financially. If you watch my Instagram following, it's actually going down over time, despite being very active on Instagram and having posts that just blow up all the time. The total number of followers is going down. Compared to, I don't know what other people's sales numbers are for their apps and their DVDs, but it certainly hasn't been good for business. However, I do believe it's been it hasn't been convenient. None of this is convenient. I don't like wearing masks. I don't like not going to movie theaters as often. I don't like only getting outdoor reservations at restaurants. None of this is convenient. It's not convenient to go to medical calls for people who can't breathe in the middle of the night. It's not convenient to have to go visit a friend of mine who used to run marathons on 1 day's notice, who's now been down for 9 months with long COVID, and can barely walk around the block. None of this is convenient. I don't want any of this, but it is the morally correct thing to do.
So how do you personally deal with have you had any attacks? Have you had people calling you all sorts of names? And I mean, social media and the internet is just vile and filled with hatred and people just kind of looking for any reason to attack. I'm curious, emotionally, how have you dealt with it? How do you just do you practice the subtle art of not giving a fuck? What do you do in order to just brush it off? And do you brush it off?
I wish I could. I wish I was just a touch more psychopathic, that I wouldn't give a shit what other people thought. I do, though. So what I do is, if I think there's a good faith, I'll respond to stuff as best as I can. I mean, I have a limited amount of time. This fighting on social media, believe it or not, is not the only thing that I do. If I think it's a good faith question, I will answer it, and I have spent hours talking to people and trying to, talk them, give as honest answers as I can to, say, the relative dangers of the mRNA-based vaccines, and sharing the research that the animal studies for this vaccine started in the 1990s, and some people can have their minds changed with facts, and I'm very happy that I've helped some people modify their behaviors. That's the first reason that I speak up. The second reason that I speak up is I think it's just really important in the sport to have, in a sport that's dominated by influencers who have a very strong vested interest in denying all this stuff, to be a voice of reason, to give some hope to the average person who's training. Is everybody in this fucking sport crazy? Right? To be kind of the official opposition within the sport. And the third reason that I'll engage is if I think that there's a teaching moment. There's a lot of people who are just never going to be convinced. Some people will be convinced by data. Some people are so far gone that I don't know what it will take to change their mind. Maybe they'll never change their mind, but I'm not necessarily talking to them. I'm talking to the people who are reading these comments. So if I can educate, then I will. That being said, my life has gotten a lot better since I've gotten much more ban happy, block happy, and I've lost track, but I've probably blocked something like 3,000 people over the past 4 months on mostly Instagram, certainly Facebook, and a little bit on YouTube. That makes me happy, and it has reduced the cesspool that the comment section had become. So yeah, I am censoring them. But if you're going to come at me personally, or if you're going to spew more than one or two pieces of blatant disinformation, I'm not going to allow you my platform, such as it is, right? I'm not going to allow you to amplify your message about how, I don't know, Bill Gates is pushing ivermectin to sterilize the blacks, to reduce world population and implant microchips. Like goodbye. Like, you find another platform, go play with your friends, see if
Right.
your family has probably already abandoned you.
Stephan, I put up a post a while ago, probably a couple of months ago, that went viral, and the spew of hatred that I got on social media was vile. And I actually put up a post afterwards saying, I'm happy to engage with anybody in a respectful manner that wants to engage. But this is not some woke bullshit platform where you can spew whatever thoughts you want. And since I did exactly what you did, which is block people and stop these shitty conversation, my world has become much better. And the truth is, it's my platform. I can actually do whatever I want with it. I invite people into my house. I don't invite people that I don't want. I invite people that I do want. So to my patients and to the people that I see that are engaging with all this hatred, it's not healthy. It's not healthy. You only have X amount of energy to invest into the world. Invest it into things that create the most amount of value.
I totally agree. You also don't want to allow your platform to be hijacked. Like, it's a fine line, because you can educate laterally. I might be talking to you, but I'm really talking to him. And
Sure.
So it's a fine line. Ask me in 10 years if I did the right thing.
I hear you. But do you think there's any value in uniting over this? Do you think we can unite? Do you think we should unite? As you correctly said, I think there's the fringe minority that will never be convinced. They believe the earth is flat and it is what it is. And they don't want to come and they don't want to understand, or they don't want to be open-minded to the alternative. But the majority in the middle of this bell curve that are open to negotiation, are open-minded, do you think there's any value in bringing them together?
What do you mean bringing them together?
Well, I guess getting everybody to be on the same page in terms of the direction, the best way forward in terms of the vaccines and the pandemic, COVID, and how we treat it and how we move forward as a society.
Well, arguably that is happening, right? Like, vaccination rates are continuing to go up. It is just like how science around COVID was super messy last year, right? Conflicting results. Is this aerosol? Is this contact? I was busy, bleaching my avocados initially, and then it became apparent that that's the wrong thing to do, right? The science evolved. Now, basically, all my attempts to not get this frickin' virus are based around masks and ventilation. And if that information changes, I will change my actions. I don't know about the United States. It's such a polarized society, but I see other countries, through a variety of push and pull factors, are gradually moving to the middle. And some people will get motivated by some will be early adopters, some will be right in the middle of the curve, and some will be late adopters. I know one of the people who was on the trials for the early mRNA vaccines, and I think there was legitimate reason to be concerned about being in a trial, not because it's mRNA. I think mRNA vaccines have been around for much longer than the anti-vaxxers give them credit for. The first human trials for mRNA vaccines started in 2008. They didn't work for most of the things they were tested against, but they didn't cause any harm. So that person was incredibly brave. Me, I took it after when it was my turn. I don't think that was brave at all. Some people are being forced into it, kicking and screaming. There's one guy I know who says he'll get it when it's a prerequisite to go into a hockey game. I think that's cowardly. I think that, like, basically he's saying, I don't give a shit about you. I don't give a shit about my kids. I don't give a shit about infecting other people. But if it comes between me and my hockey, I'll get it. So I would say that that is not the best of reasons to get it, but it still means as a society we are moving towards a new normal, and this is that in real time. It's only been a year. Um, we'll never get everybody, but I think that middle is moving. I mean, it's unfortunate that it's so polarized in the United States. But you notice even Fox News, right? Fox News, after spewing vaccine misinformation for like 6 months, basically did the math and figured out that Republicans were dying at a much, much higher rate than Democrats. This is my interpretation. I don't know that this happened. But I do notice that Fox News pivoted on a dime, and everybody except basically Tucker Carlson started going, I've never been against vaccines. You know, me, Sean Hannity, I've always been pro vaccine. No, you haven't. But it doesn't matter. Like, they're coming to the party late. They did the math. I think they figured out that their viewers were going to be disproportionately affected. And so they've moved into sort of the middle-ish position. I think that's what social change looks like in real time.
You know, Stephan, what I found is that a lot of my patients, and through these conversations, I found that people are not as afraid of the vaccines and distrusting of the vaccines as much as they're distrusting of the scientists, the data, and governments. So governments have lied to them so often that about politics and economics and social equality and a million different things. And if government has lied to them about that, why wouldn't government lie to them about these vaccines? And the lack of trust in government is what's stopping people from engaging. Do you find that in Canada it's the same, or from your observation?
Canada has much higher vaccine rates, and we're fortunate in that the three political parties, yes, there can be more than two political parties, the three major political parties are all basically pro-vaccine. So it's not an automatic that the conservatives, which is sort of be a rough equivalent of the Republicans in the States, they have been pro-vaccine. They might be different in the nuances, right? They might be different in like how we're going to apply passports or who should be vaccinated mandatorily, but they've never been anti-vaccine. So that's a huge benefit right off the bat. And it also goes to show that you can have a democracy where it doesn't necessarily split out along those two lines, right? There's lots of countries where it's not that controversial. It's just been politicized in a few places. In terms of distrusting government, I get it. If it was just one government saying it, like, like China says that Sinovac is great, the Sinovac vaccine. I think there's reason to be doubtful of that. China has lied a lot. And if it was just, Dr. Fauci and the CDC saying, Pfizer and Moderna are great, okay, valid point. But when you're looking at it in aggregate, and you're looking at every country that's brought these vaccines in has done their own research. When Health Canada started giving this out to Canadians, they followed the progress of people in vaccinated versus people who haven't been vaccinated. So now you're saying that, okay, the CDC and Fauci are in league with Elizabeth Tam and Health Canada. Okay. And Israel, what about the Israeli data? Where, as soon as you start administering vaccines that get crashed, now it's going up again as the efficacy of those vaccines wears off. That's a whole nother discussion. All right, so now the US is in league with Canada and in league with Israel. What about the UK? What about, at a certain point, it just gets, you're positing this vast worldwide conspiracy where Mr. Pfizer calls up the heads of state and all the scientists. There's a red phone that rings in every virology lab in the world that says, this is what you must find. I've worked in labs. That's not how it works. You put 5 in the room, they'll have 10. Like, it's trying to sheep, or it's trying to herd. No, it's not trying to herd sheep. It's trying to herd cats. It's not this magic top-down, here are the results. And as a result, you end up with dissenting voices, right? You end up with that 1 or 2% of virologists who have not very many virologists have alternate opinions, but the 1 to 2% of doctors who have alternate opinions, the 1 to 2% of data scientists who come to their own conclusions, because there is no top-down control. There is no red telephone that rings in the lab that tells you what today's findings should be. So at a certain point, I lose a lot of patience. I lose patience with, like, the government just wants you to do that. Okay, the U.S. government wants you to do something just in the United States. Cool, but
Okay.
if replicating countries and organizations and health professionals and data scientists are finding this, like, it's not just Pfizer doing the tests and then giving you the data. There's so many levels of oversight here that, the regulators know that drug companies can lie about their data. That's why the data goes directly to the regulators. Like, okay, I'm just ranting now, but
Right. Got it.
I
Got
respond
it.
maybe more in more measured tones to people who are saying this is just all a giant government thing. You basically have to then invoke a giant worldwide conspiracy where everything is controlled by George Soros or something, which is retarded.
Right. So, people are going to watch this, Stephan, are going to go, this guy, as I said, well-spoken, he's got an incredible mustache. How do you grow this thing? We need to figure this one out. And I want to get more information. And what I lean on, because the truth is I go on Google and I type in, are vaccines safe? And I'm going to get actually what I want to hear, because there's a natural bias for me to gravitate towards information that confirms what I want to hear. So what do you suggest people lean on, and where do we go for real, let's call it truthful information?
Well, the easy answer there is let's look at what the public health measures are in most of the big Western countries in the world. If you don't believe the CDC, go look at the Health Canada statement. If you don't believe Health Canada, go to the UK health site. If you don't believe the UK and you can read German, go to the German site. Right? They French, go to the France site. So that's the easy answer. No, public health has not been perfect here, and there's mixed messaging. And by and large, if you go to, I live in British Columbia, I do not agree with everything that public health is saying here in British Columbia. I think they're vastly underplaying the data showing that aerosol-based transmission is a real thing, and that we should be paying more attention to ventilation. But that's quibbling, right? The overall point of vaccination is supported across all these different health organizations. So I think that's probably the easiest way. Since we're talking on Instagram, I would say that there are some really good Instagram accounts that are doing their very best to take data. Every time I've gone and tried to fact check their data, like, okay, this guy's talking about this study. I don't do this for every one of them, but this guy's talking about this study. Let me go and read that study myself. And it's hard to read studies.
For sure.
Yeah, unless you have a background in science and statistics.
It's impossible. It's impossible.
Yeah. And it's not, I'm not saying that I'm the world's best statistician, but I have enough of a background to say, yeah, okay, like they're p hacking. I'm getting into the weeds here. They're hacking the significance system here. I'm not going to talk about that. If somebody really wants to talk to me about p hacking, they can message me, and I'm more than happy to talk about examples of that, especially with regards to the new ivermectin studies. So, Dr. Kat Wallace, right? I think Dr. Kat, epidemiologist, she does really good stuff. Dr. Eric B, he does really good stuff on Instagram. Nini and the Brain, I've had her on the podcast. She does really good stuff. Unbiased SciPod, they do really good stuff. And I say this because I haven't fact checked them. But I have checked to see what they're saying corresponds to the actual best science at the time, and I have faith that all those people would pivot on a dime if there was new data, because I've watched them pivot on a dime and say, yeah, we used to think this, now we think that.
Right.
Kind of
Right.
admit wrong. Like, I guess there's still people yelling about hydroxychloroquine, but I didn't see anybody go, I was a big advocate of hydroxychloroquine last year, and I'm wrong. Yeah, if
Right.
somebody never admits that they're wrong, nobody ever goes over their losses, admits to their losses, and they're probably not being truthful uh, about their predictions either.
So I've got three more questions for you because I know your time is limited and I appreciate all the time that you've given me. First of all, do you think like someone like Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan goes on his podcasts and he, never mind in the past he said, if you're young and you're healthy, you don't really need it. But now he's saying since he's had it, he's have had all these myriad of medications that he's taken. Ivermectin is one of them. Do you think as a person of influence, you think you have a responsibility to not say certain things, to say some things? I mean, he did take it and I think he's getting better. I don't know. I don't follow him. But do you think what kind of a responsibility of a person of authority or of influence has?
I think there's a Spider-Man rule, right? With a great power comes great responsibility. With a humongous freaking audience comes great responsibility. And I think just leave the ivermectin and vaccine out of it, although I'll circle back to that. This is somebody who has platformed Alex Jones many, many times. Let's remember that Alex Jones was hugely behind the Pizzagate thing, was busy telling parents of children who'd been shot in school shootings that they weren't really parents, that they were crisis actors, that no kids were actually shot at Columbine or these other places, that these were all crisis actors hired by the government who were trying to take away their guns. This is the guy who's talked about interdimensional space aliens. I believe he talked about smuggling children to a base on Mars or the moon where they would be abused there by Democrats. This is the person that Joe Rogan is giving a platform to. So right away, I think that's irresponsible as hell. I don't, the whole, I'm just a comedian, folks, you shouldn't listen to me. I'm just a comedian. What do I know? Well, when you look out and see that, holy shit, people are actually going to an all elk meat diet because of me. People are following the things that I'm saying and they're listening to the guests that I have on the platform. You do have to pivot. I think it's humongously irresponsible. It is interesting that as soon as Joe Rogan gets COVID, he starts taking monoclonal antibodies, for which there's excellent data suggesting that it helps recover from COVID, and prednisone. Again, there's excellent data suggesting prednisone helps, and all everybody wants to talk about is ivermectin. He's taking ivermectin. Yeah, he's also taking a whole bunch of other stuff that may not be available to you if you don't have $10,000 a day to spend on. I don't know how much monoclonal antibodies are, but I heard estimates. People were throwing out numbers on the internet. I have not fact checked this. Between $10,000 and $100,000. Right. So if and how much is he paying his doctor? And can you find a doctor? Like if I'm Joe Rogan's doctor and Joe Rogan calls, I'm picking up the phone. I'm talking to him personally. He's not going to wait in line for 45 minutes to talk to a receptionist to get an appointment 3 Thursdays from now. He's going to get attention today. I hope everybody has that luxury, and I hope everybody can, start out with monoclonal antibodies and prednisone and an airlift, Johns Hopkins, if it all goes sour. But the reality is most people, and take ivermectin too. The problem with ivermectin is that the data around it is real shitty. There are some big trials going on right now, and I hope actually that they turn out to be positive. I hope that there's really good data showing ivermectin is the miracle cure that it's cracked up to be. For a whole bunch of reasons that we probably don't want to get into, right now the data does not exist. So by promoting ivermectin, you're actually dispromoting vaccination. And we do know that vaccination has got something like a 20-fold reduction of your odds of ending up in the hospital, of dying. And, like right now, ICUs, they're all filling up again. And this whole ICU is filling up again is a very, that's an easily manipulable metric, because I've talked to nurses who say, yeah, we have our ICU, and then it fills up. And all of a sudden they stop all the surgeries, they create a new ICU. Yeah, we've got lots of space in our ICU, but they're taking nurses who haven't been on the floor for 5 years. They've been paper shufflers going, you come and work in this new ICU. They're like, we don't have any critical care training. Doesn't matter. You're now an ICU nurse. So, this ICU business being full, if they're saying it's full, there's already like double or triple full. And the nurses working there might have, one nurse to two patients as opposed to two nurses to one patient. I'm ranting now. So anyhow, Joe Rogan, yes, he has a responsibility. He has failed in his responsibility. I don't think getting COVID was a come to Jesus moment. I mean, the odds are that most people who get COVID are going to be fine. The statistically, something like 10 to 25% of people end up with long COVID. I hope he doesn't get long COVID. Long COVID is absolutely devastating. The odds of Joe Rogan dropping dead from having COVID are pretty low. Call it 1%. But that doesn't mean a 99% chance of getting better. And if he'd been taking lavender oil or had been running around with a quartz crystal on a chain around his neck, he probably also would have gotten better. And people would have taken that as proof positive that lavender oil is a cure-all or that quartz crystals are some kind of magic shield against viral replication.
So,
Did I miss something that you wanted my answer?
No, it's good. I just wanted to know, like, obviously he's a person of great influence. I'm thinking like this dude got better by wearing, a quartz crystal or taking some form of oil, and he says it to the world. And I was wondering what your view in terms of, does he have a responsibility to not say what he has done? Maybe keep his mouth shut. I'm not sure.
I don't know what happens once you get COVID and that, but I'm talking about all the stuff he's done before. The stuff he's done in the last year. It seemed like I don't follow Rogan anymore, but it seemed like about March or April of 2020, he did a hard pivot and went from talking to actual epidemiologists to just talking to every fringe crank, like, hey, Brett Weinstein, come on my podcast and do an emergency podcast about how ivermectin is, how vaccines are incredibly dangerous and how ivermectin is going to cure the world. So that's more what I'm focusing on. What he's doing now.
Got you.
Like, he hasn't been out there engaging, going, no. Like, I'm rich and I can afford treatments that you can't. Fucking get vaccinated. That I would respect. Hasn't been doing that to my knowledge.
So, I mean, people are going to watch this. Two more questions, we're done. People are going to watch this and are going to go, okay, I hear you, but government cannot force me to do things that I don't want to do with my body. How do you feel about these vaccine passports? Should government have the right to take away your right to travel and to go to concerts and to go to restaurants? Should governments mandate vaccines? What's your personal position?
That's a really tricky question. On the one hand, I don't want government to tell me what to do with my body. On the other hand, government already does tell me what I can do with my body. If I decide to sit here and drink myself into oblivion, I'm allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to get out into my car and drive down the street while I'm drunk into oblivion. So government is telling me what I can do already. Government is telling me that, I can't send my kids to school if they're not vaccinated. They're telling me what I need to put in there. And that's not an absolute, but that's a general rule. In theory, there are vaccinations required to travel to other countries. That has been enforced with more or less regularity, but I bet it's going to get enforced now. So there are already some precedents. I don't know about a society-wide vaccine passport. They're in the process of introducing it in British Columbia. I think I'm generally in favor of it, but I'm not an expert in public health. I'm not an expert in the ethics of this. I think I just don't know what the unintended consequences of this are going to be. I've not done sufficient research. I will say that I work as a first responder. I'm a firefighter, and I will say that I'm very strongly in favor of medical professionals nurses, doctors, anesthesiologists, paramedics, firefighters, cops with having mandatory vaccination. That's going to generate a shit ton of blowback. But you are going into people's houses. Usually you're going into people's houses, at least in the case of paramedics and firefighters, who are sick. They already have a medical problem. You don't have a right to bring additional medical problems into their house. Yes, I know vaccination isn't a perfect way of, you can be infectious after having been vaccinated, but the odds of being infectious are less. The odds of you being sick at any given point in time are less. You're carrying a lesser viral load probably, and you're carrying it for a shorter length of time. So it's like saying, people die with seatbelts on. Yes, but we still, overall, the odds of dying with a seatbelt on are much less than if you don't have a seatbelt on. So right now, and again, this isn't an area that I'm super conversant in. This isn't an area I've done a lot of reading in. I haven't talked to a lot of experts in public health about mandatory vaccinations. I don't know. I think I'm in favor of it. I am very much more in favor of it for medical professionals and people who end up dealing with sick and vulnerable people. As a first responder, by law, like, we have a right to kick your door in and go into your house. Cops, if they think there's something going on, if we think there's a fire, I've kicked in lots of doors. Sometimes it's the wrong door, right? I'm sorry, I thought there was a fire here. It's actually the apartment next door. Sorry about that. We'll figure that out. I've kicked in doors when somebody was having a cardiac arrest inside. It was the only way to get to them. But what if they hadn't had a cardiac arrest? And what if I haven't been vaccinated? What if I am asymptomatic but infectious? You didn't have a cardiac arrest. That's awesome. And now you have COVID. As a public servant, I don't think I have the right. So maybe there's middle ground if you haven't been vaccinated. Like Fox News, of all people, I've actually recommended the Fox News policy to people. And it's the only time in my life that I've ever recommended Fox News. Fox News, for a while, had a policy where you didn't have to show whether you're vaccinated or not. That's your business. Everyone has to wear a mask unless you decide to show us your vaccination. In which case, if you have been vaccinated, you get a little gold star or whatever it is, and then you can go about without a mask. I don't know if that's changed now, but it's kind of an interesting middle position where, just wait till the people who are invoking Nazi Germany get here. That you're going to wear a yellow to prove that you've been vaccinated. Like, that's a problem, but you have the right to drink. You don't have the right to drink while my kids are walking down the sidewalk and you're in a car. You have the right to not get vaccinated, but do you have the right to go into the restaurant where I'm sitting with my 10-year-old who can't yet be vaccinated? I don't think so, but it's not an area that I feel super confident pontificating about, despite having pontificated about it for the last 15 minutes.
So, Stephan, one more question, like maybe a last parting words, any sensible advice to anybody that's out there that's on the fence? We're not talking about the fringe that will never like what you or I or anybody says. They're stuck in their ways. For the middle ground, the ones that are open-minded, and I'm sure people that are going to watch this are going to be open-minded to this conversation, any sensible advice to them?
Yeah. I think it's really easy to get rabbit-holed with bad information. And the algorithms on Facebook, on YouTube, reward this, right? If I start Googling nothing but flat Earth videos, soon I'll be deluged in flat Earth videos. If I start, typing in, is the vaccine dangerous? And I scroll down and I find the one link and I click on it, the algorithm is going to pick that up and you're going to be drowned in information. So I think it's worth looking at. If you don't trust any one government, look at what other governments are doing. If you don't trust any one organization, look at what other organizations are doing. That's one point. Second point, you're always going to be able to find dissenting voices, right? The system rewards dissenting voices. There are lots of financial incentives for being a dissenting voice. My friends on the Conspiracism podcast talk about watch what they say and then listen to what they say and then watch what they sell. Many of the freedom fighters here are busy, from JP Sears to Joe Rogan to Alex Jones. they're busy flogging their immune supplements. They're unproven immune supplements with like one study with like 12 people that was done by their cousin, right, to prove their point. So you're always going to be able to find dissenting voices. That is a healthy thing in general within science. It's good that there were people pushing outlying opinions about everything. I mean, you're like, there are probably people dissenting, that black holes aren't real. It's good that we're considering whether or not black holes are real, and that 1% of the physics population is going, yeah, they're probably not real. And then we argue about it, and it proves the science. So don't confuse the fact that there's a few dissenting voices with the vast, overwhelming majority of what doctors are saying. And don't get fooled by the rabbit hole that you're in to think that all doctors are doing this. Finally, just with regards to the mRNA vaccines, this is my canned rant. They've been around a long time. There have been animal studies on mRNA-based vaccines since the 1990s. There have been many, many human trials starting in 2008, 2009, going on. So this isn't new technology. The blatant fear-mongering that's going on here, it jumps from talking point to talking point. It's like a message goes out. This week, we're going to talk about this one study, and then every one of the acolytes disseminates that one talking point. I think the data is pretty overwhelming. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. But it reduces your odds of, even with the Delta variant, of ending up in hospital by about 20-fold. That's a 2,000% risk reduction. Yes, there are breakthrough cases. It isn't necessarily binary. It's not like, vaccines work or they don't, or vaccines work and then we don't take any other precautions. It's not like lockdown or complete freedom. No, there's a shade, a gradation of things. It's not like do jiu-jitsu, don't do jiu-jitsu. Let me just talk to the jiu-jitsu audience for a moment. It might mean train in smaller groups. It might mean get vaccinated. It might mean take risks in jiu-jitsu class, but don't be an asshole outside of jiu-jitsu class, right? Don't go to that rave and then go to limit the amount of exposure so that you're taking some of the risks, but not all of the risks. And finally, it's not all about you, right? Like a big part of the reason to get vaccinated is to protect other people. There are lots of people, like something like 6 to 8% of people who take the vaccine don't develop any antibodies at all. And it's higher in some populations. So, currently there's something like 13 to 1,500 people a day die in the United States from this. That's almost half of September 11th. Look at how we turned the world upside down for September 11th. And now we're talking half of September. It's like, imagine if the terrorists were blowing up an apartment building every single day, day after day, after day, after day, after day. And a pretty big apartment building with 1,300 people in it. It's worth taking some steps to protect those people. And by you taking those steps, again, you getting vaccinated is not perfect protection to mean that you're not going to infect somebody else. But you're much less likely to have a breakthrough infection, and you can't pass on something that you don't have. And if you do get infected, you'll be infectious for a shorter period of time. And if you do get infected, your odds of ending up in the hospital and destroying the ICU system are less, right? Every additional person who goes into the hospital right now means that when we bring somebody in from a car accident, or they fell off a ladder, or they pull them out of a fire, there's one less nurse at the hospital to work on that person because they're all over there in the ICU. So, it's not all about you. It's also about society. It's also about other people.
Stephan Kesting, you just do not disappoint. You're an absolute giant in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community. My friends and colleagues and Jiu-Jitsu partners are very jealous that I'm speaking to you. You're an absolute powerful voice in this this incredibly harsh debate, but you held your own and you speak eloquently, and it's been my personal indulgence speaking to you. You're awfully kind, as I said, incredibly charming and well educated, and I'm sure many people will benefit from this. And once again, I really thank you for your time, and I wish you good luck with your aim. I think it's noble and it's good, and it comes from a great place, and I wish you good luck.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm so glad we were able to go over the initial 15-minute time slot.
You've been kind.
Yeah, for asking me, like, framing this as a the grand unifying theory of everything conversation.
Well, thank you for indulging me in this conversation. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Best of luck to you too.
Yeah, all the best. Bye-bye.